新福里情绪教育推广协会为了让台湾推广情绪教育经验能够跟国际交流接轨，特别邀请美国推广情绪教育的重量级人物 Greenberg 教授来担任论坛的主要演讲者。Greenberg 教授是儿童情绪教育发展协会 Council 的重要创始会员，他也在2016年荣获美国心理协会发展心理学的终身成就奖。今天他将分享情绪教育的国际趋势与在美国近30年的研究与经验。让我们热烈的掌声欢迎 Greenberg 教授。Let's welcome Dr. Greenberg to the stage. Welcome.
Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
It's such a joy for Krista and I to be here in Taiwan and to talk about this topic. We have had such a warm welcome in Taiwan. It feels like home. I'm so thankful to the Happiness Village Association for the warm welcome, but even more importantly for the pioneering work they have been doing in Taiwan to build social and emotional development. There's lots of people to thank here today, and I won't thank them all, but I want to recognize the Ministry of Education and Health, the people here in public health, philanthropy, which is critical for this work to continue, our visitors from Beijing and Shenzhen and Shanghai. This is an international issue, and of course in the mainland it's also of interest, great interest, and the interest is growing quickly. But most important to thank are the parents and the teachers. So how many of you in the audience are parents? Almost everyone. So we've all struggled with the hardest job in life, which is being a parent. And how many of you are teachers in the classroom? Great, great. Teaching is often called the loneliest profession. It's a very, very stressful and difficult job. And in most countries in the world, we do not sufficiently honor the job of a teacher. So very important for us to honor teachers today. So professors like me can talk forever and say very little. You know the universities, you know how we are. So I'm going to try to be pretty direct today about my messages around social and emotional development. I should note that I'm the developer of the PATHS curriculum, and whenever I give a speech anywhere in the world, I want to mention that I have a conflict of interest because I receive royalties from this curriculum. And it's very important in medicine and psychology that we recognize any conflicts of interest. So we're going to start with voting. And I have a poll for you, and I want to see your hands raised if you think the answer is yes. And the first question is, are people with better social emotional skills more likely to succeed in school and in life? Yeses, raise their hands. Oh, this is going to be a great audience. Second question. Can social and emotional skills be taught? Yes or no? Yes? Okay. Very important question, because when I began this work in 1980, 36 years ago, I was told it was going to be a waste of time. That children have personalities, and some are nice and some are not so nice. Some are very outgoing and some are very shy. And there's nothing you can do about this. It's genetics and personality. And that's why very careful scientific research, and I'll talk later about the issue of randomized trials, is critical, because we have to test to see what things actually work. Not everything works. Not every good idea turns out to be effective. And so it's very important that we use a strong evidence base to understand which things work and how to improve them as we go along. But the answer clearly to this question is yes now. We have strong evidence, and I'll mention some of it later. Third question. Will children be better prepared for college and careers in life if we teach social and emotional skills? Yes? No? Yes. Okay. And I'll talk about the data on that as we go along today. So then the question is, then how can we ensure that educators, human service providers, and families teach these skills effectively? How can we do that? That's the fundamental question. If we now realize that in a global society, that being a global citizen requires these kinds of skills, and these kinds of skills improve our well-being, most importantly our friendships and our family life, but also our academic abilities, then how are we going to change the system? How can we effectively make change to make this a more central part of education? This is a fundamental question. It's not been solved anywhere in the world. Some countries have made more progress. But I don't come with answers today. I come with thoughts to share with you. So what is social emotional learning? There are various definitions of what is social emotional learning. I'm one of the founders of CASEL. CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It's based in Chicago and has a wonderful website, casel.org. And CASEL says there are 5 components of social emotional learning. The first 2 are, in the red, are about the internal life. It's knowing your inner self. The first one is self-awareness. It's the ability to know your inner life, how you feel, and be able to express how you feel. To know your own strengths and weaknesses. To understand the deepest values that you have and your sense of purpose. Okay? And at each developmental stage, from kindergarten to primary school, to secondary school, to the university years, to being a parent, to being a grandparent, at every stage in life, we face these issues of self-awareness. It's not something just for children. It's for all of us. The second is self-management. It's once we are aware of our emotions, how do we manage them? How do we know when to stop and calm down? When to tell someone else how we're feeling? It's not always good to tell someone how you're feeling. Right? We have to really be very thoughtful. It takes a lot of cognition to think about how to appropriately self-manage, to manage your own emotions and your behavior. The second component is the interpersonal. It's the skills between us and others. It's our relationships. And we talk about 2 components there. The first is just being socially aware, the social awareness. And that has to do with first understanding others. Oftentimes when we have problems with our friends or in our marriage, we are not thinking about how the other person feels, what the other person is thinking, what the other person needs. So the ability to really understand other people and what their needs are is a critical issue for healthy relationships. And that requires us to have empathy or compassion for others. And this is something, again, that develops slowly. Even as adults, we're still struggling, aren't we, with social awareness? We're oftentimes making mistakes or hurting others because we're just not thinking carefully about how our behavior impacts other people. And then there are the relationship skills. How do we communicate and persuade and negotiate? How do we become a good friend to another person? Right? Good friends share deep interests, and they communicate well with each other. Right? And how can we help children to develop close, long-term relationships? Many children are very anxious, they're very stressed, they're not sure who they can trust. And so helping children learn to form effective relationships is critical. But it's not just one-on-one relationships, it's also learning how to work in groups, how to work in a work situation. We talk about this as 21st century skills. Corporations all around the world are saying the problem with our employees is not their technical skills. Technical skills are easy to teach. We can teach everyone information technology. We can teach people how to code. We can teach people how to handle the issues that are very complex in banking. But the ability to work with others effectively, especially across cultures, is a critical issue that we can teach children and adults how to do better. And all of this is centered around the green. And the green is our thinking skills. It's our ability to think, use our thinking skills clearly to understand our situations, our problems, and to make ethical choices, to make choices that are choices to do no harm to others, to really think carefully about our choices in a broad way. Now these are really the key to life in a way. We can teach children reading and mathematics, science and technology, but we're not teaching them to be a person, to be a whole person, if we're only teaching that kind of education. It's important that we have the arts, drama, music, and similarly it's critically important that we help children to be their best, to optimize their ability to be a caring person in a global society. Why is this coming up as an issue now? It's a really interesting problem. Why in so many countries is this issue of social emotional development now arising? Okay? I think there's sort of two major reasons, I believe. The first is we've become a global society. And in a global society, we really need intercultural understanding. And that means we really have to have empathy for people that are very different than us. And in a country like Taiwan, when I was a child, in America, everything was made in Taiwan, right? You were a manufacturing society. But now you're not. Now you're post-manufacturing. Just like most Western societies, we're not going to make a lot of things anymore. We're going to work together in groups to create ideas, right? New technologies, new ways of handling issues like climate change, right? So we're a post-industrial society, and that means we have to help children as well as ourselves as adults become better global citizens. And that's one key reason why social emotional learning has become such an international issue. The second is because the, quote, illness of our age is stress. Okay? It's very rare that I meet anyone, it doesn't matter if it's in London or Israel or Shanghai or Taiwan, who doesn't say their life is too stressful. How many people don't have any stress? Okay. So the ability to reduce our stress, both by living a healthier life, but also by learning to manage the stress that we have, is critical for our health. Not just our mental health, of course it's important for our mental health. Many stress disorders show up in mental health problems like depression, very serious anxiety. Adolescent suicide is in fact mostly a problem of children who feel stressed and they don't know what to do about it. But these also show up as physical health problems. Many of our physical health problems, what we call chronic diseases, are diseases of stress. Right? In the earlier period of the 20th century, the major problem was infectious disease. Now we've pretty much solved the problem of infectious disease. Now we have chronic illnesses. We live longer, and these stress-related disorders are often what is costing our society the most, and it's the most painful to ourselves. So global citizenship and stress are two really important reasons that we are focusing around the world on social and emotional development. And that means it's not for children that already have depression and anxiety. Of course, they need social emotional learning. It's for all of us. This is not a problem for resource rooms. This is a way in which we all have to learn new ways to be with each other and to lift all boats in the way that we talk about in public health. So in 1994, I and a couple other people, Daniel Goleman and Roger Weisberg, a group of us who had already been working in this area for about 20 years, began to meet together and form a society, CASEL. And we felt there were 4 reasons that we thought this was an important part of every child's education. The first is what Mrs. Yang said, and that is schools often ignore or don't have sufficient resources to solve the problems of children's mental health. And so one way to think about this more effectively is to lift all boats by giving all children skills. We reduce the number of children that have mental health problems. So there's a story about a guy, and he's at the top of a waterfall, and he sees all these people going over the waterfall, and at the bottom of the river there's an ambulance, and the ambulance is picking everyone up that falls through the waterfall, off the waterfall, and taking them to the hospital. And then another ambulance comes, and it picks up another person that fell off the waterfall and takes that person to the hospital. And so it goes on all day, ambulance after ambulance taking people to the hospital. And the man finally says, why don't we build a fence at the top of the waterfall? And that's the issue. As long as we just treat mental health problems in children that already have them, we will never make our society a healthier place. We'll never reduce the number of children that have problems. We have to take a public health approach, just like we do to heart disease, right? Where everyone knows what's a healthy diet and what's not a healthy diet. Everyone knows that walking every day is good for our hearts, right? And so we have practices that every one of us use, not just people that are at high risk for heart problems. It's a public health approach. And so we've believed in CASEL that we needed to begin to take a public health approach, not just treating children that already have problems, but thinking about how we create a healthier society. The second thing we wanted to do is advance the science of social emotional learning, to actually prove what is effective and also what is ineffective. Just like in medicine, we want to show which surgeries for back pain work and which ones don't work, right? Medicine is changing all the time. In the same way, the science of social emotional learning is changing. And we need to know up-to-date information on the science of what is effective. The third is we want to expand practice. Because if we know things are effective, and you took my poll, you all voted, saying that this is important, how do we go about expanding the practice? What are the leverage points in society? And lastly, we want to improve policies. And in fact, right now in America, there's a national commission on social emotional development, and you can Google the National Commission, and you'll see lots of new information on research in this field. Oops. So in 1997, we wrote the first book. We call this CASEL 101, Social Emotional Learning 101. It was the first book, and it laid out guidelines in each grade level for what are the skills that children should be learning in order to become competent, healthy adults with positive well-being. And the idea here, of course, is that we need to coordinate schools and families and what we call community programming, for example, after school time, to improve social, emotional, and academic learning. And when we do that, children will both be academically successful, they'll be physically more healthy. Most importantly for me, they'll have good social relationships. And in a democratic society, they'll become engaged citizens. And we know that this is critically important in a democracy, to have people engaged in discussion about what kind of society they want to have. More recently, just a year ago, the first large handbook came out with many, many chapters. It's a bit dry and academic, but it shows the growth of science in this area over the past 2 decades. So SEL is now an international policy issue. Krista and I travel around the world, and everywhere we go, people are talking about the need to innovate in education and in public health to support social emotional learning for children. And examples are in the UK. Scotland is a beautiful example where Scottish schools now have social emotional learning as a central part of education. And in our work with the PATHS curriculum, we're working in, I would say, somewhere around 300 or 400 schools now in the UK, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, etc. Singapore, I visited Singapore almost 10 years ago, because Singapore also is very much a post-manufacturing country, and they realize that the most important skills that Singaporeans will need in the future are social-emotional skills. Of course, they need technical skills. Those are easy compared to being a really good person. Canada is a great example. In British Columbia, one of the provinces on the west coast where Vancouver is located, has passed a law that social responsibility, which is really just the word for social and emotional learning, is now equal in education to reading and math and science. Okay? It should be taught at the same level. Okay? So this is very innovative. And you see there are some countries that are really leading this from a policy standpoint. And of course, many of the Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Denmark, have a strong focus on this. And I met Krista in the Netherlands in 1986. So that's 31 years ago. We just had our 30th wedding anniversary. Thank you. And that was because even back in 1986, the Dutch were already interested in this issue. Australia is a place we do quite a lot of work in both Western Australia and in Victoria. But there are new frontiers. China as well as Taiwan are places that are so important to the future of our global world, and there's growing interest there. Obviously, we have it's evidenced by the visitors we have today. And the African continent is also now becoming more interested. I have colleagues now that are working in a number of African countries to introduce social emotional learning with young children. So why is it important? First of all, there's a paper, a scientific paper. Actually, it's now published in a journal called Child Development. And it shows that it did what's called a meta-analysis. And a meta-analysis takes many, many studies and combines them together to make an overall conclusion. In this case, it took 217 studies, done mostly in the United States, but some in other countries. These were careful studies, trials, involved about 300,000 children. Okay? And what it suggested is that we can improve children's social emotional skills by 23%. Of course, if we're teaching social emotional learning, we should improve those skills. We can improve pro-social behavior, the ability to get along with others. But most importantly, from a policy standpoint, there was an 11% improvement in children's standardized test scores in math and reading. We also see reductions in problem behaviors and emotional distress, things like anxiety and depression. So why is that the case? Why people were very surprised at the beginning about these findings. They were not surprised that there's an improvement in mental health. But many policymakers, especially in education, were surprised that it improved children's achievement test scores. So how would it do that? How would it do that? So I asked teachers in Shanghai the other day when we were visiting, and they told me two reasons really, I think. The most important reason is that when children have good social emotional learning, the classroom becomes a more healthy environment. And when the environment is more healthy and the teacher has a better relationship with the students are more engaged in learning. They're more attentive. They can concentrate better. And when they are attentive and they concentrate better, their scores improve. Okay? Now we can think about this from a neuroscience standpoint, because when we understand the developing brain, we know that the emotional connections in the brain are very, very close to the thinking skills in the brain. And you all know this. You all know that when you get upset, like you're very angry at someone, or you've had a really bad day, or you've been in traffic for an hour in your car and you're just so frustrated that you don't think straight. We all know that when we're upset, we need to calm down first to really use our thinking skills. And that's because the cognitive part of the brain cannot be well accessed when the emotion parts of the brain are flooding the brain with distress. Okay? So when we teach children how to become more aware of themselves and others, how to communicate their feelings, how to resolve problems, we see that they're able to concentrate better, and when they concentrate better, they learn more effectively. So my friend Daniel Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence many years ago, and what he said is that this social emotional learning is a master skill. It underlies all effective outcomes. But we can also think about this from an economic standpoint. Economists are very interested in the question, does social emotional learning, is it a good economic investment for a society? And you can see that the result shows that there's about a savings of $11 for each dollar that was invested in 6 different SEL programs that were studied in the United States. So what did they look at? They looked at things like, as adults, the children who have schools that use SEL, are they more likely to pay taxes? Are they less likely to be arrested and have criminal costs? Are they likely to be physically healthier, so they use less medical insurance? Okay? And what we see is that's the case. And the PATHS program, which I'll talk about more later today, has shown a benefit of $21 for every $1 invested. And that's mostly because when you improve both academic abilities and you decrease mental health problems, you have a healthier society. We're using less services that are stress-related services. So how is it implemented? So now we know that SEL has effects from randomized trials. We know that it affects our physical well-being as well as our mental well-being and our academic achievement. We know it's economically sound. That's a pretty good set of arguments, isn't it, for why we should be moving forward as a society. But how do we implement it? So we think about social emotional learning. Here's the 5 quadrants of the Castle model, right? Those 5 skills I already mentioned. And we have to think about 3 levels at least. The first is using good SEL curriculum that we know have evidence that work. Okay? The second thing is we have to have quality instruction. As the teachers need to be well trained, or the parent volunteers in the case of the Happiness Village. Your parents are amazing, and we saw a wonderful lesson at Minsheng Elementary School yesterday by a parent volunteer. But we need both good curriculum and we need good training for instruction. We need not only to think about what goes on in the classroom, just what the teacher is teaching instruction-wise. We need to think about the whole school. What's happening in the whole school? What's happening in the hallways? What's happening in the teacher's lounge? Everywhere. So we infuse this quality of social emotional health throughout the school. And lastly, we need to think about families, involving families from the beginning, which Happiness Village has done an amazing job in Taiwan. And we need to think about communities. For example, after-school programs, summer camps, all kinds of other activities that children are engaged in that are important for their development. And then, of course, we could have more circles. We could have the Taipei City School District Circle. And we could have the circle of the Ministry of Education, right? Larger, broader policy circles. Sorry, having a little problem here. Okay, so if we want to have a system, it's a good idea to have teachers teaching curriculum in the classroom, but just the first part of solving this problem. So we want to think about how schools and school districts and governments can take a broader systemic approach to this problem. And that means first that there has to be a vision of what it is that we want. And that vision may be very different in kindergarten, in primary school, and in high schools, for example, because of the different structure, the different developmental period, the changes in the growing brain of a teenager, for example. We need to know what our resources are. What are our needs? So one school may have a certain set of resources and another school a different set. One school may have a particular kind of need, another school may have a different kind of need. Then we want to embed professional learning. We want teachers and the school secretary and the custodian and the lunch ladies, everyone in the school to be embedded in learning about how to do this well. Even though the teacher or the parent volunteer is teaching the lessons in the classroom, unless children see all of us using these abilities, they really won't use them very much. So this is a problem of what we call generalization of the skills. Then we want to implement evidence-based programs and policies. And we can select from programs that already exist, or we can develop and test new programs. We want to integrate throughout the school and beyond to the families. And like any good kind of business or science, we want to be using data regularly because we need to improve. The first time we try to embed this kind of approach in school, there'll be some things that will work and some things that won't work. And so we want to use data for continuous improvement. I was at a school in Shanghai late last week in which the school is taking data from the children on how the children are feeling and what they're doing and what they like and what they don't like. And they're assessing how the families are feeling and what the families feel is needed, just like Mrs. Yang showed you data earlier. And then they revise the programs in the school based on continuous data. It's very unusual. Most schools, unfortunately, focus on their achievement test data. And that's it. Because that's the policy criteria by which most schools are measured around the world. Right? And what we're seeing now in many countries is policymakers are saying, of course academic test scores are important, but we have to have other measures of a school's health. We have to have other measures of children's well-being that are just as important as achievement tests in order to make a healthy society of global citizens. So what does school-wide social emotional learning look like? Well, it's everywhere. We want to know what's happening in the front office. So when parents are greeted by the school secretary, how welcoming is he or she? If children go to the office because they're having a problem, do people know how to talk to the child about the problem they're having? Right? We want to make sure sure the We want to make sure the library is a place that has good books focused on social emotional learning, right? All the different parts of the school are all important. What happens in the principal's office is probably the most important, right? What is the principal doing as the leader to support social emotional development? When a child comes into the principal's office, maybe because they've had a problem, how does the principal talk with the child, right? Does the principal just call the parents so the child gets in trouble? Can you remember some of you having that problem? Or your parents were called? Well, that's not a good way to learn. A good way to learn is not when we humiliate a child, but when we begin to discuss with them what happened, why did it happen, how is it affecting other people in the classroom, what could the child do next time that's different. So instead of having children feel humiliated and suppressing their emotions, the goal in social emotional learning is to have an open discussion about what went on and how to improve it next time. And the principal's office is an important place for that. Okay? So we've been studying social emotional learning for about 35 years at Castle. And these are things we know are important. If we want this to really work and to be sustained over time, to really have a public health impact, we need to have school-wide use. Not just in the classroom is critical, but across the entire school. We need to have strong leadership. The principal's behavior, his or her behavior, is the critical single element that makes this work or not in a school. And when you see a great principal create a warm, caring school, it's a beautiful thing, because it doesn't happen very often. Many children don't feel their schools are warm, caring places. They think they're places in which they have to perform, and if they don't perform well, they'll feel shamed. And that's not how we build a healthy society. We need teachers to be consistent. All the adults in the school to be consistent in using the skills. But we have to be very flexible. Every situation is different. We want to use evidence-based curriculum. Just like if you go to a doctor, you want the doctor to use evidence-based medicine. But we want to flexibly use it. So in each school, in each context, we're doing it a little differently. We're fitting the context. We want to integrate. We want to integrate with the rest of the school curriculum. So for example, what the librarian has children doing in the library, what the physical education teacher is doing in physical education, what the art teacher is having children do in art classes. Right? All across the school, we want to integrate the idea of social and emotional learning. And we want to integrate it with a particular school's and neighborhood's culture, both the school and the community. We want to use the community's own local resources to make this really fit as beautifully as possible. So, for the last 36 years, I've been working on one curriculum. And it's gone through many evolutions over the 36 years. In fact, for the first 5 years, 1980 to 1985, it was only used with deaf children in sign language. That's how it evolved originally. So PATHS is a school-based model, only done in schools. It's very important that it's taught by the teacher, we think, on a regular basis, because the teacher is with the children during the day. It's not just teaching the skills during a 30-minute period. It's having children prompted to use the skills, to practice the skills, especially when they're highly emotionally aroused, like after being on the playground, or when they've had a hard time with a test, or they're not understanding the academic material. We have versions for kindergarten from age 3 to 4 through age 12. And it's used in somewhere around 3,000 schools throughout the world, many different countries, including now recently translated in Chinese and being used in Shanghai. So what are the core features? What makes a good curriculum? our goal in the end is this simple statement, the golden rule. Okay? It's in every society. It's Confucian, of course. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And if we only did that to each other, we'd have a very loving society. But there are a lot of developmental skills that are necessary to reach that goal. So in our curriculum, we focus on these things. We focus on children's awareness of their own emotional states and the emotional states of others. We focus on how to use language, putting feelings into words, because language is power. The more articulate we are about our situation, our feelings, the more articulate we are about other people's feelings, the more likely it is we can solve the problems effectively. If I think someone is shy, if I think someone is conceited when instead they're shy, then I'll do the wrong thing with them. I'll solve the problem incorrectly. If I think someone is angry at me when they're really disappointed in me, I'll probably solve the problem incorrectly. Okay? So these distinctions in understanding how you feel and how others feel is really critical to having healthy, caring relationships. Now, in order to put feelings into words, you've got to first calm down when you've had a problem, when you're feeling upset. So teaching people how to calm down. Yesterday we saw a lesson by Happiness Village on being a ninja in order to be able to calm down and use your skills effectively. We want to teach children the problem-solving, cognitive skills of planning ahead, really thinking ahead, not just about what I'm doing now, but what effects it has in the longer term. And we want to help develop greater empathy and compassion for others. We want children to realize that we are all the same. Even though we may look different, even though our cultures may be different, we all have the same feelings inside. We all want to live happy lives. We all have the same needs. And that's the golden rule. The golden rule is in every society. It's a fundamental aspect of the human condition. It doesn't matter what society really you're in. You'll see it in religions, you'll see it in native, non-religious societies. It's fundamental. So if we have a good curriculum, has a clear strategy, a set of goals, what about implementation? Well, we need skill building for both the children. We're teaching the children skills, but often also for the teachers. Because teachers in their teacher training never get a course in social and emotional development. Isn't that interesting? Given what I've told you today about how important it is for learning and for life, it's very, very rare anywhere in the world that in teacher training, teachers get a class on social and emotional development. They might get a class on how to manage the classroom, right? How to keep children in control, but not about how children's emotional development develops, how to support it, how to implement programs, etc. So we have a big gap in teacher training. Second is we want to create opportunities all day long for children to use the skills. Third is we need to give sufficient technical support to the teachers so they really are skilled at doing this. In the same way that Happiness Village has been giving lots of training and technical support to the volunteer parents that do the work here. We want to integrate it into other academic subjects. So yesterday we saw a beautiful lesson at the elementary school that was focused on helping children to distinguish between when things happen by accident versus on purpose. It's a very important distinction. Many times, even as adults, we have problems with our relationships because we think someone did something to us on purpose, and it makes us very angry, when in fact it might have just been an accident. They didn't really mean to do whatever they did that made us angry or upset. And with children, this happens all the time. One child pushes another child in line, and other children then are pushed, and the children turns around and pushes back, and a big problem begins. And it's because the children didn't take the time to really look at the clues and see, why did this happen? Was it an accident? Was someone really being mean to me? Okay? It's a critical distinction, and even in adulthood, we often make mistakes. Okay? But the accident versus on purpose distinction can be used now in social studies or in other areas. And I gave the example yesterday of climate change. Climate change is a major problem for all of us, especially with my president. Very embarrassing for most Americans, his behavior. Climate change happened, and we have a big problem now all over the world. It's one of the problem of water and the problem of climate change are our two biggest environmental problems. The climate change problem happened by accident. We didn't want to create climate change. We just did not realize what the effect of using so much oil was, of using so much coal. No one knew. No one knew about it. Just like no one knew that smoking cigarettes caused cancer. We didn't realize it. This happened by accident. But now, if we continue to hurt our environment, if we continue to use coal, if we continue to use oil for the next 50 years, we're going to ruin the planet. We're already halfway there. So now, this is a problem. If we continue to do the same behaviors, now it's a problem that's on purpose. Okay? So we've taken a problem, accident versus on purpose, that we talk about in a social emotional learning lesson. Now we're applying that same concept to a global social problem. That's integrating across the curriculum, right? And of course, involving parents is essential from the beginning. So we think teachers need training. In our work, we do 2 days of training during the first year. We have a coach that visits classrooms and gives teachers technical support or feedback. The coach meets with teachers after they see a lesson individually or in grade level groups. That coach receives ongoing technical assistance. That might be a local lead teacher in a school, a curriculum director in a school. And the teachers use PATHS about 2 to 3 times a week for about 20 minutes. Sometimes a little longer with older children, sometimes a little shorter with kindergarten children. It varies. So with little children, we want to teach them first to calm down, because we all know that if we don't calm down when we're upset, we make situations worse, right? And you can all think of something, maybe in the last week or two, where you've had the feeling of regret. And when you look back at that situation, you'll probably realize that if you had just calmed down and thought a little bit more about the situation, you wouldn't have made it worse. Okay? Happens to all of us. Right? We're all human. No one is perfect. So with little children, we teach them this. Kindergartners, we have a metaphorical story about a little turtle. And the little turtle has lots of problems. He's not getting along with his friends. He doesn't like to go to school. He wants to stay home and play on his iPad. Right? 4-year-old, 5-year-old, already doing that. And he's very unhappy. He feels sad, and he feels lonely, and he doesn't know what to do. And he meets the wise old turtle of the town. The turtle's very, very old and very, very wise. And the turtle says to him, the answer to your problem is inside yourself. When you feel upset or angry or very sad, you can pull in your arms and your legs and take a long, deep breath, and then you can calm down and think, what can I do? And we teach children to do this, to do turtle. Okay? It's for young children. And when they're doing this, they can't be hurting anybody. And it gives the teachers a signal the child's having a situation and they're already trying to work on it. Okay? When the children get a little bit older, by grade 1, we use something very similar to what Happiness Village does. We teach what we call the 3 steps for calming down. This is what the turtle learned. The turtle learned to say inside to himself, I need to stop. And taking one deep breath, or maybe you need to take a number of deep breaths, and then say inside of yourself what my problem is. What's my problem? How am I feeling? That's the red light. That's what the turtle learned. Now, that's the red light. And now by second grade, we're now teaching the yellow light, which is the thinking skills. How do we solve the problem? How do we identify the problem? How do we generate solutions? How do we decide on a goal? How do we think about the consequences of each solution? How do we make a plan? Right? And then finally we go and we try our plan. And you know how life is. Usually when you think through a problem, even when you use the red light and think through it carefully, you often come up with an idea, a really great idea. And then when you go and you try the idea, it doesn't work very well. Maybe because of the way you did it, the way you said it, or the way your body looked, or you weren't aware of what the other person was feeling. And so lots of times we try great ideas and they don't work. So then we've got to evaluate, how did I do? And oftentimes it didn't work. And then we've got to go back to the beginning and calm down again and again use our thinking skills for another solution. So for example, if we look at aggressive children, children having peer relations problems, and we watch how they enter a group of other children that are playing, about 30 to 40% of the time when children try to enter a group of children that are already playing a game, they're told to wait or they're rejected from the group. Okay? That's sort of normal. And you learn as a kid, sometimes when other kids are playing, you have to wait. And so you have to calm down because you tried to enter the group, that was your plan, and now you've got to calm down and wait. But for aggressive children, that's where the problem begins. It's not that they don't know how to enter a group. It's when they get rejected by the group, they get very upset. And they start thinking all these thoughts like, no one likes me, or these kids are mean, or you know how you can ruminate all these thoughts. And then they're very angry and they do things that make their peer relations even worse. Okay? And we know oftentimes it's not the first solution that works, but a second solution or a third solution, because that's the way life is. Krista and I are planning to go to Bali on Saturday. But you know the volcano is going to erupt. So now we have to think of a new solution. We had at breakfast this morning, we had to stop and calm down and think now, what else could we do instead of going to Bali? Maybe it's not a good idea to go to Bali. Okay, so it's not just for children, it's for adults, right? And then we teach children about feelings. And for each feeling that a child learns, they get a card. The yellow cards are for comfortable feelings. We never say good or bad. We say comfortable and uncomfortable. Because all feelings are okay. All feelings are natural. But some feel uncomfortable. And some feel more comfortable. This is for children that are for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, maybe third grade. Because when they have these cards, and each child gets cards, they start to use many more feelings than when they don't have the cards. The visuals very help them. It's almost like they can see their brain on paper. Okay? So if I was a teacher and two children came in from the playground, they're having an argument, one says to me, he took my ball, and the other one says, but he pushed me. Or if you're a parent, you know this all the time. The little girl says, my big brother pushed me and hurt me, and you weren't there. You don't know what happened, right? So what can you do? Well, instead of just punishing someone, you can say, first, you both look very upset. I want you to go find your feeling face and tell me how you're feeling. And what we're doing is we're activating the cognitive part of the brain to begin to control the emotional part of the brain so we can calm down and have a real discussion about what happened. Okay? Instead of just blaming the older brother and punishing him, which is usually, I'm the older brother. It happened to me. Okay. So scientific evidence is important. I've told you about the broad evidence of the meta-analysis. But with the PATHS curriculum, it's the most studied, most researched curriculum in the world. We've had many studies. There have been 13 careful randomized trials. Randomized trials means that all the schools are interested and want to do the curriculum. Randomly, half are given the curriculum and half are not. And we look at the effects over time on children's outcomes. Okay? We've done it with typically developing children. I think I mentioned that this PATHS began with deaf and hard of hearing children. We've done it in resource classrooms around the world. We just saw a beautiful lesson in a resource classroom in Shanghai last week. And we've done it with urban populations and rural populations, with different ethnicities. So we understand a lot about how it works. We've studied it in Aboriginal rural Western Australia, and we've studied it in London. So very, very different environments. You can see we've conducted trials in these different countries. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the research. The first question is, can we promote better social and emotional competence? And the answer, of course, to that is yes. We see improvements in how teachers rate children's ability to tolerate frustration, which is really important, because if you can tolerate frustration, you can continue to concentrate. We see that the classrooms that have PATHS show better peer-rated positive behavior. So we interview each child in the classroom, and we ask the children, who are the friendly kids in the classroom? Who are the kids that are disruptive? And we get an average number of children per classroom that are aggressive or are friendly. And we see that the PATHS classrooms have more friendly, positive children. Even in young children in kindergarten, we call 4-year-olds, we see improvements in teachers' and parents' ratings of children's competence. We don't need to wait. We can do this when they're 4 years of age. They are ready and excited to learn the turtle and talk about their emotions, etc. So here's just an example of data. This is by parents. Parent reporting on children's abilities to get along with others, to regulate their emotions, etc. You can see in the control group, there's no change over the school year, and in the intervention group, we see a significant increase in their abilities. Can we reduce behavior problems? In grades 2 to 5 in America, that would be 7 to about 11-year-olds. We see improvements by teachers in both the externalizing aggressive problems, but also in the internalizing anxious and shy problems. We also see when we interview children that children report fewer depressive symptoms. They report less sadness in classrooms that have used the PATHS curriculum. So here's an example for teacher ratings of aggressive behavior. No difference at the beginning. This is in 2nd grade. This is the end of 2nd grade, end of 3rd grade, and the end of 4th grade. And what you can see is the control group is showing more problems across time, but the children that were in the PATHS classrooms are buffered, or they're protected by the skills that they've learned. And we can see the same thing for children's own reports of depressive symptoms, of sadness, feeling lonely, feeling very tired, etc. You can see that the control group doesn't change 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, but the intervention group goes down and stays down for 2 years. And I think that's because when we help children to express their feelings, they don't feel as alone. They feel more connected to others. Right? Instead of bottling up all these feelings, not telling anybody, starting to think that you're no good, it's the self-confidence you mentioned earlier. We see that children, when they are rewarded in a way for expressing how they feel, they show lower rates of depressive symptoms. Can an SEL program improve the climate of the classroom? So in one large study, this involved 6,000 children in 378 classrooms around the United States, 4 cities. We sent in observers at the end of the curriculum to the intervention and the comparison schools, And you can see that the intervention schools have more positive classroom atmosphere than the control schools. But there's new research, most of that's older, and new research is going on all around the world. It's done independently of me or my laboratory, so it has no bias in it. And an example is we work very closely with people in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, and the Belfast region, where there's been a lot of trouble. You know, the war between Catholics and Protestants has gone on for many, many years. And even though the war is settled, there's still a great deal of animosity and still violence. And so the Northern Ireland government asked us to come and teach these skills. And in this case, we looked at 12 schools, and we looked at younger children, and we looked at older children. This work was done by an independent research group in the University of Queen's in Northern Ireland. And what we found with younger children is that those schools that had PATHS, children showed greater empathy, greater helping of others, and less negative affect. They were more positive in their relationships. And here's an example. This is a question: how often children volunteer to help others? And you can see in the control group, well, just a small amount of change, but in the intervention group, this is the start of the year, the end of the school year, and the end of the next school year. There's significant growth in the children that are in the PATHS schools in helping others. For the older children, we see the same kind of thing. We see greater empathy and cooperation, more reflectivity, more ability to look and reflect on things, and to perseverance, which means to keep working when you feel challenged, and lower fighting and aggression. So here's an example. This is a very important skill for 12-year-olds, listening to others' points of view. And what you see is that in the control group, it's going down across time because they're becoming teenagers and they don't listen very well to others, right? Especially their parents, right? But in the intervention group, you see the teachers are saying children are still doing well at that skill. So I could show you similar data in high schools, not the PATHS curriculum, but with other curriculums showing similar effects. We've done studies in Turkey, at Ege University in Izmir, Turkey. Similar kinds of ideas with young children, end of kindergarten, and we see their improvements in concentration and attention, and social competence, lower aggressive behavior, and teachers feel that they're giving better emotional support to children. In two different studies, pretty much the same results. These are all published in the literature. So in summary, how am I doing? Am I okay? Where's my time card? Still good, okay, good. Okay, in summary, I know you must be tired of me by now, listening. What have we learned over 30 years or so of practice? We've learned that implementation of an SEL curriculum is difficult. It's challenging because it's creating change. And schools are conservative institutions for good reason. And schools have to be very careful and deliberate in making change because they're the most powerful institution in our societies. Building readiness of the school and the leader is really important. The biggest effects occur not when we do it just in the classroom, but when the whole school is participating as a community. Being consistent each year, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and building these developmental skills, just like we teach reading. The way we teach reading to first graders is different than the way we teach it to fifth graders, right? It's the same thing with social emotional development. Because in reading, children develop new cognitive skills, so we teach them more complicated strategies. It's the same thing in social emotional development. As children get older and they get cognitively more complex, we have to deal with new issues. An example is gossip. Gossip is a big issue, like bullying. Gossip is a form of bullying for girls mostly, where one girl will tell another girl something, that's negative about a third girl in order to make our relationship closer. It's very mean. It's a mean girl behavior, right? But you can't gossip until you already understand all these relationships. And so you don't see it develop until about 10 years of age. Children don't gossip when they're younger because they don't understand all these relationships. So you can't teach children about the problem of gossiping when they're 6 because they don't know what it is. But when they're 10, boy, they are ready to talk about it because it's happening all the time and it's really bothering many of the kids. Flexibility and integration. So, what I've talked about today is mostly this, social and emotional skill development. And when we do this well, we have the outcomes that I've told you about. But we also want to think about the other effective conditions for learning. How good is the curriculum? How well are teachers trained? How good is classroom management? Because if the classroom is not managed well, then these skills can't be taught well. But the third thing is the part we never think about, which is the teachers themselves. And teachers are very stressed. In both America and in England, it is now considered to be the most stressful occupation, similar to nurses. Dr. Li in Beijing at Renning University has done a study of mainland China teachers and shown that over 50% feel moderate or severe stress every day in their jobs. Okay? So we need to be thinking about teachers' well-being and their awareness because the teacher is the leader of the classroom. If a teacher is feeling very stressed, very unhappy, they're not going to teach well. And one of my colleagues has just done a study where they've looked at teachers and they've looked at teachers' moods and their behavior. And then they've looked at the cortisol level in the children. Cortisol is something we secrete. It's a stress response in our body. We can assess it by looking at saliva. And what we see is that in teachers that are unhappy, have upset moods, the cortisol in the children is much higher. So it's not just that children don't like being in a classroom with a teacher that's unhappy. Their physiology is changing. Their health risk is growing. Right? This is not just about being nice. It's about how our bodies are developing wellness. So we need to think about all three of these. So the future is school-wide SEL, right? But school-wide SEL means we're not only taking care of the children, we're taking care of the staff. We're taking care of teachers and their own well-being as well as the children. And recently, Krista and I and others have been working for the last 10 years developing programs for teachers to reduce teacher stress. And we see that when we reduce teachers' stress by teaching them good personal awareness skills, PATHS for adults we call it sometimes, it's called the CARE curriculum. When we do that, not only are teachers feeling better and enjoying their teaching more, but the quality of their instruction improves. Because when they are feeling happier, the whole classroom is better and they can teach more effectively. So what are the implications? The implications is that SEL works. We have positive outcomes, including academic achievement. And it works across grade levels and many contexts, urban, rural, minority, non-minority people, disadvantaged children, upper middle class children. It doesn't matter. We all need these skills to live a healthy life. SEL is doable. We now have demonstrated in many places in the world, including the Happiness Village, that good results can come from programs. And in the future, we want many of these programs to be run by the school themselves, by the teachers. We need to change teacher training and give teachers support so that it becomes a central part of their job. And the support and involvement of the parents is really key here. And lastly, to do this, SEL needs support. The implementation matters. It's not a matter of just buying a curriculum. It's thinking in that systemic way I talked about what are our needs and our goals. How are we going to implement this? How much coaching the teachers need. Teachers need time to talk and learn from each other as they do this work. And we need government policies and leadership in order to move this forward. And so, of course, I'm very happy that people from the Ministry of Education and Health are here, because this is an issue that joins education and health together for well-being. So I close with a picture. This is a small village, Pula in Croatia, where a Croatian teacher is teaching social-emotional learning, and all the children are showing us their feeling faces. So thank you.
谢谢，我们非常谢谢 Dr. Greenberg 教授的演说。Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg. 刚刚杨丽蓉理事长有介绍他的太太在台下，其实教授也有私下跟我说，不能只有介绍他是教授的太太，因为呢，我们的 Krista Tersma 他自己也是临床儿童心理师，而且他也是正念 mindfulness 的训练师，我们也再次欢迎他来到我们这里，谢谢。刚刚透过 Greenberg 教授的口中，我们再次的印证，今天我们论坛的主题是情绪教育的推广，亲师携手将会产生最大的力量。尤其是学校的投入将是扮演非常关键的角色。今天在现场，我想有许多的校长、主任、老师，你们都坐在台下，跟我们一起参与论坛，可不可以请你们也挥挥手，让我们跟你们致意一下我们的校长、老师们，谢谢你们，谢谢你们的付出，谢谢你们扮演情绪教育推广的最重要的角色。